and you're watching NDTV 24/7.
Greeted very warmly by Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
Welcome back. It's 1 p.m. It's Republic Day. We had that absolutely fantastic parade earlier in the morning. And now we're looking ahead to the Indo-US Business Summit. All sorts of discussions likely to take place with CEOs on both sides, and both Narendra Modi and Barack Obama are likely to be addressing businessmen and talking about how the two countries can take their economic relations forward. And we're here to try and discuss and come up with some possible suggestions and ideas. Let me just get Mukesh Bhutani into this now. Mukesh, any specific suggestions that you think might be on the agenda? We keep hearing talks about various treaties, agreements, possibilities, something which can be signed. Is it about that, or is it just about getting the atmospherics and others correct?
I think what I expect later in the afternoon, besides the point that Sid mentioned about ease of doing business in India, comfort that the Indian side would like to give to the Americans, I think two issues that could come up. One is the impeding India-US bilateral investment agreement, because that investment agreement has not just got to do with how US companies feel secure about operating in India and that their investments are secure, but also India's view towards taking away tariff barriers, the view that India has about the totalization agreement, for which India incurs $1 billion of cost in the United States by way of social security payments that Indian IT services go. I think the second important issue that could figure is on the intellectual property rights, and this is a politically sensitive issue. On one hand, you have India's desire to make inexpensive medicines available to citizens at large. On the other hand, there is a US view about the intellectual property rights. So there are two aspects. One, the view that large US pharmaceutical companies will take vis-a-vis investments in India, given India's intellectual property record, and the investments that Indian pharmaceutical companies will make in the generic space in the United States. So I would imagine that the two issues that could prominently figure, and we will see in the weeks and the days ahead, would be bilateral investment trade and IPR.
I'm sure all of your clients, and especially your American clients, for 3 to 4 years have been doing nothing but talking to you about the problems around taxation, retrospective taxation, adversarial tax regimes, and issues like that. Now, this government has been at pains for the last 5-6 months to say all of that is a thing of the past. We will not do any of that again. Further reassurances you think would still be asked for?
I think the Prime Minister has been talking about non-adversarial administration, as is the Finance Minister. He spoke in Davos last week. I think, budget may not be the indicator. That I think over a period of time it is the actions that should reveal. Retrospective amendment, I think he's covered it last year, that this government's intent is not to have retrospective laws. Specifically to India-US, there are issues outside of the law, which are these whole bunch of 200 mutual agreement procedure tax disputes between the Indian and the US competent authorities that are yet to be resolved. I would imagine that there are already press releases made by the Indian side that this visit is going to pave way for resolution of those disputes in a time-bound manner. And the other aspect is the US took a position that they will not support a bilateral advance pricing agreement, and now US will have to in turn, reciprocate by saying that US is open. And I think at the end of the day, this gives more certainty to US businesses, because they won't have transfer pricing law adjustments in India.
All right. Well, Pratap Reddy joining us as well, Chairman Apollo Hospitals. But Dr. Reddy, before I come to you, Raj, I just wanted to ask you, we did see yesterday a very neat finessing of a couple of the really controversial issues. For example, on the civil nuclear liability issue, they did seem to come to some sort of a solution. On climate change, we still haven't heard that much, but we heard interesting comments from Narendra Modi, essentially saying a lot of this is in India's own interest. Do you expect something similar on some of these issues, the investment tax?
The big negotiation is over. I mean, I think there is a long section on economic cooperation. All these issues are mentioned. For example, the question of bilateral investment treaty. They want to start some kind of a dialogue on how to go forward. On totalization, again, there's a reference. So I think you're not going to see any new decisions or announcements. What you're going to see, I think, what the two leaders are trying to do is, when they reach out to the CEOs, to jointly make that presentation that, look, we're open for business, there is the political blessing, we're going to fix problems. I think that's where the nuclear thing comes as a way of confidence building. Look, 8 years it took for the previous government, just signing and making it a reality. Look, there is a government here that can sort out problems. On climate change, I think it's very, very important what Modi did yesterday, because on the left and right of a political spectrum, as you know very well, a total opposition to any flexibility on India's position. But what Modi said yesterday, with Obama standing next to him, it's not his pressure. The pressure is about global warming and what it does to my own people. So therefore, we got to do something about it. So I think saying that we will work with the United States, this is certainly a taboo that has been broken yesterday. But the real deal, I think there is a deal to be made, which is US will support us on expanding non-renewable energy sources, so that the relative weight of coal can decline. That's something which Modi wants to do in any case. He keeps on talking about solar. He's been talking about solar for years, long before he became Prime Minister. As a Gujarat Chief Minister. So I think one of the agreements they had was that, look, US would invest in Indian production, India would try and get more technology and some assistance. So I think the signs of a broad framework in which we could move forward on climate change, that's a huge, huge step forward.
Okay, I'm going to ask all of you about climate change, but first, Dr. Reddy, thanks for joining us. Now, healthcare obviously is something particularly close to President Obama for various reasons. Of course, it's been one of the cornerstones of his entire administration. What are some of the things that you'll be looking for later today?
I think we're very happy the way the discussions have been taking place the last 2 days between our Prime Minister and President Barack Obama. You know, in healthcare, there are 2 or 3 things which are very important. First, of course, they talked about clean air, clean water, and climate change. Clean air, clean water, I think is a major issue, and I hope whatever steps that we can take together in this will make a very significant difference in health of all people. But in US and India have already been collaborating in clinical health care. You know, we are clinically we are doing everything possibly, doing everything in any good hospital in US is doing, all of our hospitals are doing. But most importantly, what we need to work together is this new threat of NCDs. What do we do with this, the huge diabetic problem, and we're the heart capital of the world, cancer capital of the world, and the infections. In these, I think there is a need for a greater cooperation. We already had last year a Future Health Conference where the thought leaders from US and the West participated in it, and I've already presented this to our the Prime Minister. I'm going to talk to the Health Ministry too. But I think what we need is the closer collaboration in scientific activities in health, in development, especially in stem cell therapies and in biotechnology and nanotechnology. This is where I think the meetings that our Prime Minister had and the negotiations that have been taking place will take this forward. What US should allow our scientists to go there for longer periods, and India should allow foreign scientists, foreign doctors, foreign expertise to come for 2, 3, 4, 5-year periods, and together I think we can work and make a very significant difference. We have already shown that whatever, as I said, we have huge interaction in clinical cardiology, clinical oncology. But what we don't have is a collaboration that is required in development and innovation. And innovation, I think it's a very useful thing, both for US and as for India, because whatever we innovate in India, if it's ready for India, if it's good for India, it's good for the rest of the world, because we can do that in 1/3 of the time, and probably cost 10% of the cost that for that new innovations. Even some of the agreements, 14 agreements that have been taken place before on child development, nanotechnology, biotechnology, in all of these also are held up. I hope during these discussions we will be able to take that forward. Most important thing that we are all looking forward is, what do we do with this big challenge that we have? Where is the closer collaboration and the resultant ways that would help India, and not just India. Whatever we learn in India, I think we'll be able to give it to a large number of emerging countries, as well as the countries like Africa and all.
Right, Dr. Reddy.
The NCDs as projected by the World Economic Forum is a very serious threat.
Right, Dr. Reddy, those are some really interesting points. Mr. Chairman, let me just throw some of that to you, because obviously when we are talking about innovation and entrepreneurship, we think about it sometimes more in terms of tech and IT and the internet and things like that. But actually a lot of that work is taking place now in areas like health, in biotech, in stem cells, in genetics, in genomics. And that's actually a very fertile sort of a place where India could play a very, very major role going forward, especially when you sort of look at the basic natural strengths that India does have. Look at the amount of doctors there are in the US who are all from India.
Right. So I think we have to look at what's the point of the innovation.
It's not only there are two wonderful things that we have. India has this population. India has this huge disease burden. Yes.
Yeah, Dr. Reddy, I'll just get Nish to just comment on that, then I'll just come back to you. Just give me a second.
Right. So what I was suggesting.
Thank you.
Was that innovation has to serve a specific purpose, and in this case it has to be the creation of hundreds of millions of jobs for India's working class and middle class, and to bring people out of poverty. And I think the areas you mentioned in healthcare, the nanotechnology, low-cost innovations in diagnostic testing, these can have huge impact. And I think specifically the United States needs to look at the next 2 decades and really look at next-generation technologies that can do that in India. So I'm talking about things like 3D printing that allow India to circumvent some of the transportation and logistics challenges in India, synthetic biology where India has a lot of raw materials that are very useful, big data and analytics where there's IT capacity, and next-generation farming where we know that India needs to increase its productivity by over 70%. And where's that 70% productivity going to come from? It's not just drip wells and things that we're working on now. It's going to be next-generation technologies, mostly from the United States, Israel, and other places. And so how do we invest in those now and do more pilot research, more startup creation, so that in a decade we actually have companies that can scale that up to create economic value, but also create millions of jobs in India.
Right. Mr. Birla, dragging you in on that, at the end of the day, these new areas, are those the ones to look at, or at the end of the day, India also, to get employment and other things, would need to get the cement plants and the steel plants and the rest of it, the old economy, as it were?
Yeah, the brick and mortar, as I call them. I think India cannot afford to be choosy. We have to look across the entire spectrum, including knowledge-based industries, businesses, service businesses, as well as manufacturing, as well as infrastructure. Let me quickly give you some numbers which will help you put this in perspective. The number that we bandy about is we need to create about 1 million jobs every month for the next 10 years. That's a humongous amount of jobs. Now, if you look at these very specialized sectors, how many jobs are they going to provide? Maybe 10%, maybe 12% out of this number of people that we have. A large number of people will be employed probably at the lower end of the scale, which is in building infrastructure, in building roads, in construction, and taking that forward. And that still leaves a gap of about 30-35% of 1 million every month to get jobs in manufacturing or related to manufacturing. And we still have not begun to address the problem of what I call underemployment, which is people being employed in the agri sector or tertiary sectors at, literally minimal pay. And therefore we need to bring those people up also. So I think we have to look across the spectrum But I think that many of these knowledge-based industries, healthcare and other services where India has a good track record, they will get attracted themselves. We need to really attract and build on the areas which are today lagging, which is manufacturing, brick and mortar, old economy.
All right, well, you know, just to sort of recap for all of you who may just be tuning in, it's been a pretty big morning already. We've had an absolutely fantastic Republic Day parade, the sheer symbolism of Barack Obama out there all through the morning. It is all signaling the atmospherics at the end of the day. The way all of this is presented is equally crucial. And I'm going to come back to some of the strategic aspects of it as well and take a look at what all of this is signaling for Indo-US relationships and ties in general. But Ramesh Chamani, let me get one more view from you on the economics of this and on what we should be looking for there. I think India would at some point also, so yes, we've just heard me talking about the new important areas, which there's a lot of high tech which has to be done, and India and America can work very closely. But do you think at some point we would like to see some of those factories and plants and manufacturing units and the make in India, don't make in China anymore, big American companies come and set up here? Is that something we'd like to see also, and what should Narendra Modi be telling those American CEOs when he sees them to convince them that this is where they should put up their next plants?
Vikram, good point. I mean, a couple of companies, just to give you an example, Honeywell India, David Kote, who's leading the US delegation, runs a company that is listed in the Indian stock market called Honeywell India, does a fabulous job. Stock price is over 7,000 right now. Ingersoll Rand, another company that has a long presence in India. So a number of listed US companies that have either a listed or unlisted presence in India. Now we have to emphasize them to increase their production, use India as a regional center for exports, do contract manufacturing. And some of these companies have already started doing that. The way we know that is because they're investing already in a large amount of capex. Production lines are being shifted to India. So if we can push that, that would be actually the best thing for us, because we can use that technology and India's labor skills to be a low-cost center for production of various items, whether it's electronics, whether it's technology, whether it's gear. So that would actually be good. And the people coming on the summit, most notably the leader of the summit, already has 10 years of experience at least in dealing with India.
All right. But let's just come back to the atmospherics of it. Is there a sea change in attitudes though?
Oh, dramatically. I think if you go back to a year ago and compare it to that, the optimism is really back. And I think the animal spirits are close to being unleashed. I think we'll need to see a couple of deals getting signed, particularly on the Make in India side, because that's, you just came from Davos, and that's the big sort of splash in Davos was Make in India. And we need to see some traction on that, because I think as soon as we see that, you'll start to see, and if it's one or two big companies from the US that say, okay, we buy into this Make in India thing, that'll completely transform the way India is in the next couple of years, because as somebody said earlier, manufacturing is going to be the essence of how we grow as an economy.
Right. Pratap Reddy, we're talking about other things that we can do together. Tourism, obviously something that Narendra Modi has been talking so much about. He wants to attract a lot of foreign visitors out here. And you and others have also been talking about the possibility of medical tourism. Maybe you should get a message to President Obama. You're worrying so much about healthcare. Send a lot of people out here. We can treat them for you at a fraction of the cost. keeps his bills down too.
I think we'll be able to treat all of them very well, and at what he calls affordable care at affordable prices. In India we are doing everything in healthcare. Whatever is happening in the best centers anywhere in this world. India is, I believe, is well poised to become the global healthcare destination because of the quality of care that's being given and the cost at which it's given. And more importantly, in healthcare, it's not just the outcomes. It is the attitude, is the love, compassion that the Indian healthcare people are able to deliver. This is what's impacting. Every patient who gets treated from us, when he's going back, he not only says, I'm so happy you gave such wonderful surgical outcome, but he says, your people are phenomenal. This is the attitude that they take back home, and this is where I've been for long saying that the liberalization of visas is going to make a very significant impact. the Prime Minister always is saying that India should become tourism destination, and we believe that it can become the medical tourism destination of the world. The ordinary tourist brings us $2,000, but medical tourists will bring us $20,000. Apart from that, the pride he takes back and says, wow, these Indian doctors, Indian hospitals are phenomenal. I think it is going to be a very significant impact. I believe India will progress very rapidly in the medical tourism industry. Now, going back on the discussions that the two leaders have been having, the President of the United States and our Prime Minister, I strongly believe that we will have a greater collaboration from them on high-end research. This is what really we need, and they need it too, because they are also not able to carry many researches. For example, the antibiotics. For the last decade, we had nothing at all. They're looking at a few, totally different antibiotics, but the time they take to discover and make it available, we can do it in 1/3 of the time, and cost benefit.
Right.
But equally important is the exchange of scientists. Scientists going and working there for a few years on specific projects, and their scientists and senior doctors coming to India, I think should become very, very easily possible, which will have a great impact. Already we are working with API, Association of Physicians of India, GAPIO, Global Association of Physicians of India, in clinical exchange.
Right.
But I think those are clinical and knowledge exchange. But what we need is the scientific cooperation, their NIH, their CDC. We should be able to.
Right. All right, Dr. Reddy, those are excellent suggestions, and I hope that they're going to certainly take many of those suggestions on board going forward. Well, thank you so much for having joined us with some of those perspectives. Nish, I know you have to leave us too. I'm about to shift focus and Raja start dumping into something else that I'm sure President Obama would have noticed. Throughout that Republic Day parade, he was sitting out there. He was seeing one Russian weapon system after the other going forward, till those C-130s came. So I'm sure at some point he'll be saying, what about that defense cooperation? How many things were there? There were T-90 tanks, there were BrahMos, there was Sukhois, 70% is. So I think I saw on Twitter somebody quipping and saying that actually, we should have got Vladimir Putin today. It would be like a service, like a customer service meeting also, reviewing all of the products out there.
No, I think it's a reminder of India's past, as well as the suggestion of what could be the future of India-US relationship. Now, I think it's only in the last 10 years that we started buying American equipment, and I think it's already $10 billion weapons are still in the pipeline. So I think the agreement that we've done, both the renewal of the defense cooperation agreement as well as the DTTI, should set the stage for a genuine interaction between the two industries. That I think, if Obama was saying, look, 10 years down the road, I should be able to get at least 30% of the.
Okay, so let's figure out how that's going to happen and some of the more strategic aspects and the defense aspects and how those relationships might now change. We'll turn our focus to that when we come back in just a couple of minutes after the break, and we'll see whether next time an American president comes to Republic Day, will there be a lot more American systems out there or not? And also what China makes of all of this. We'll turn our attention to some of those questions when we return.